Hello, my name is Shelby Dunn. At least it used to be. The night everything unraveled started with a single piece of mail. No gunfire, no screaming, just paper, thick, perfumed, expensive, and one wrong letter that told me my family had already begun erasing me. And that's where the story really begins. The envelope was thick, expensive, ivory-colored stock with a faint pearlescent sheen. It smelled faintly of rosewater and wealth. My name, or what was supposed to be my name, was etched in calligraphy on the front, except it wasn't my name. Not exactly. They spelled it Shelby. Twice. On the inner card, too, tucked under a gold-trimmed RSVP insert. Shelby Marie Dunn. One letter off, but it landed like a slap. They didn't forget me. They renamed me. I held the card for a long minute, standing in the foyer of my one-bedroom condo. The sun filtered through the sheer curtains behind me, turning the thick paper translucent. I could make out the embossed seal of my family's estate on the back flap. Everything looked perfect, clean, prestigious, except for me. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. I didn't reply to the invitation right away. I just placed it on the kitchen counter, right next to my unopened stack of mail. I wasn't planning on attending, not really, but something about the way they slipped that single misspelled name between so many flourishes of status, it needled me. 2 weeks later, I found myself pulling into the long gravel drive of the Dunn estate. The iron gate creaked as it opened, as if even the hinges knew I wasn't supposed to be here. The engagement party had already begun. Laughter floated across the lawn. Champagne glasses clinked. Savannah's spring air was warm and sweet with gardenia and judgment. At the check-in table near the front garden, the event planner glanced up from her list. "Oh, you're the fiancé," she said, trying not to sound confused. I smiled, tight, practiced, apparently. She hesitated, then pointed toward the far right section of the tented patio. "Your table is that way, near the beverage station." That meant the restroom, always the table nearest the staff entrance, where the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and the chair legs were slightly uneven. I nodded and walked. My heels sunk slightly into the turf with every step. I clutched my clutch like it could anchor me. My table had a crooked centerpiece and one fewer napkin than the others. The linens were damp in patches, probably from a rushed wipe down. I pulled out the chair. It wobbled. I didn't flinch. Across the patio, clusters of people laughed in tight circles. My brother, Astrius, stood by the champagne fountain in a navy linen suit, one hand in his pocket, the other swirling a glass like he owned the air it passed through. No one looked my way. Not once. I adjusted my chair silently, straightened the hem of my dress, smiled at no one. That's where it all started. I saw him before he saw me. Astrius walked over with a swagger so smooth it made you forget it was calculated. "Didn't expect you to show up after the name typo," he said, grinning. "Strong stomach, huh?" I raised my glass. Didn't answer. He tilted his head. "To what?" I clinked my glass against his gently. "To future corrections," I said. His smile froze for a half second, just enough. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. My hand trembled under the table. I hid it in my lap. My knuckles whitened, and I pressed my fingers into my thigh to keep the emotion from spilling out where anyone could see. That's when the laughter started. Not from me, of course. From across the tent, I heard my mother's familiar cackle. Sharp, delicate. Shelby's always been. Delicate, she told a guest. That's why we keep things simple for her. I stood up. I didn't even know I was doing it. I walked toward the restroom, not to cry, not to breathe, but to escape. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror, pale, perfectly made up, eyes rimmed with the kind of mascara they used on brides. I pulled the invitation from my purse, held it next to my face in the mirror. The name stared at me like a stranger. Shelby, not enough to deny me, just enough to twist the knife. I didn't cry. I pulled out my phone, opened a new note, and typed, "If they won't let me exist here, I'll make sure they remember me elsewhere." I slid the phone back into my clutch, still smiling. But something had cracked, not broken, sharpened. When I left the estate that night, the air smelled of gardenias and smoke. The sound of laughter faded behind me, replaced by the quiet hum of my own heartbeat. Something inside had shifted, sharp like a splinter beneath the skin. A month later, I found myself standing inside a bridal boutique downtown. Everything gleamed in white, silk, lace, marble floors reflecting the fluorescent lights above. I had picked out my gown weeks ago. Ivory lace, slim silhouette, a quiet rebellion against the family's taste for extravagance. It was simple, honest mine. "Miss Dunn," the manager said, stepping out from behind a rack. "Your mother called earlier. We made a few adjustments." Two women carried out a gown wrapped in plastic. The shimmer of heavy satin hit my eyes. It was a ball gown, grand, suffocating under layers of fabric. The kind of dress meant for parading, not walking. "This isn't my dress," I said. The manager smiled in that polite, professional way that meant don't argue. Mrs. Dunn approved the change. She said it's more respectable. Respectable. That word again. The one they used to smother me. I touched the gown's sleeve, cold between my fingers. The beads glittered like tiny eyes staring back. "So even my skin doesn't get to choose what it wears today?" I murmured. The manager blinked. "I'm sorry." "Nothing," I said, just thinking out loud. I tried the dress on anyway. The fabric swallowed me whole. When I turned to look in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, posture perfect, mouth stiff, shoulders trapped beneath someone else's dream. Looking back now, that was the first time I realized how thoroughly they'd rewritten me. The next day was the rehearsal at the venue. A man in a beige headset handed me a printed itinerary. "Here's the updated timeline, Miss Dunn." My eyes skimmed the paper. My name was listed near the bottom, under processional participants. Not as bride, just a bullet point between flower arrangements and music cue. I scanned the schedule again for my speech slot. Blank. I approached the coordinator, who was busy directing a group of ushers. "Excuse me," I said, "I don't see my name under the toast section." He didn't look up. "Oh, yes, that. There's been a revision. Family consensus decided speeches are better kept minimal." Family consensus. The phrase was a knife wrapped in velvet. My throat tightened. My mouth stayed closed. I nodded like a well-trained guest. My hand crumpled the corner of the paper until it tore slightly. I didn't say a word. The rehearsal dinner blurred into a collection of polite smiles and clinking silverware. My mother, Vera, approached while I was alone near the dessert table. Her pearls gleamed in the chandelier light, her lipstick flawless. "Sweetheart," she said, touching my arm lightly, "you'll look beautiful in that dress. It's so much more. Dignified. We want the family image to reflect elegance." "Whose elegance?" I asked quietly. "Yours or mine?" Her smile tightened, the way it always did when I forgot my script. "This wedding is bigger than you, Shelby. You'll understand that one day." "I understand it now," I said, setting down my glass. "That's why I'm not going to let it happen again." Her eyes flickered, shock, confusion, maybe even fear, but she recovered fast. "Don't be dramatic. Just enjoy your moment." It wasn't my moment. It never was. Later that night, I drove home in silence. The streetlights blurred past like smudged memories. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want anything filling the space where my thoughts needed to live. When I got home, I poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the invitation still pinned to the refrigerator. The misspelled name was like an echo. I opened my laptop. The folder labeled wedding planning sat at the top of the screen. I right-clicked and renamed it Contingency. The sound of the keyboard felt louder than it should have. Each tap was a pulse. I opened my old case files from the law firm where I used to work. Buried in the digital archive was one of my first ethics inquiries, an employment case involving undue family influence over contractual decisions. I scrolled until I found a clause I remembered by heart. Unlawful prenuptial influence via coercion. The words glowed faintly on the screen. I highlighted them. My cursor hovered over the save button. Then my phone buzzed. It was a notification, an image attachment sent from an unknown number, a screenshot of a group chat titled The Dunn Wedding Core Team. I wasn't in it, but I recognized every name: Astrius, Vera, the planner, the legal advisor. I zoomed in. A message from Astrius. Get her to sign it before the final venue walkthrough. Don't let her read it. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. The water glass trembled beside me, catching the faint reflection of my face. Tired, angry, alive. I whispered, "Watch me." Then I opened a blank document. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. For the first time, I typed not for the wedding, but for the fight. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the kitchen window. My laptop still sat open from the night before, the blank document glowing faintly in the dim light. I hadn't realized I'd fallen asleep there, head resting beside the keyboard, fists still curled from whatever dream I'd been trapped in. The email notification blinked in the corner of the screen. Meeting at family residence, 2 p.m. It wasn't an invitation. It was an instruction. When I arrived, the air in the Dunn house felt stale, like perfume masking mildew. Everything gleamed the way money did when it was trying too hard. The parlor was colder than I remembered, the scent of polished wood and old roses making me think of every time I'd been called into that room to be reminded of my place. My mother, Vera, sat on the edge of a velvet couch, a porcelain cup balanced between her fingers. Across from her, a leather folder rested neatly on the coffee table. "Sit down, darling," she said softly, as if softness could erase intent. I did. "It's just procedural," she continued. "A standard waiver." Before the wedding, it's important that everything is, how did the lawyer put it, clean. The folder snapped open with a sound like a judge's gavel. Inside was a single sheet of cream paper. The language was formal, sterile, cruelly polite. I, Shelby Marie Dunn, relinquish any claim to the Dunn family estate or associated holdings effective upon marriage. I stared at my name already typed in at the top, perfectly spelled this time. I looked up at her. The chandelier above us cast fractured light across her face, turning her eyes into polished glass. Maybe that shine was pride or relief. I don't want this to be about money, I said, my voice low, even. That's exactly why this is the right thing to do, she answered quickly. You've always been sensitive about appearances, Shelby. We just want to avoid conflict. They only call me selfish when I hesitate to give up what little I still own. The pen lay beside the document, heavy and gold. I didn't touch it. I could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on my chest, that old familiar ache that came from being raised to apologize for breathing. Your brother's already signed his portion, she added. This is just the natural next step. Natural, like erasure was hereditary. I remembered a woman from one of my old cases, a quiet client who'd been forced to sign her inheritance away to her husband's family for the sake of harmony. When I'd interviewed her, she'd whispered through tears, I thought signing would keep the peace. Turns out it just erased me. I never forgot that. I didn't know it then, but she had been warning me about this moment. I pushed the folder back toward my mother. You're asking me to sign away my name again. Her expression hardened. No, we're asking you to step aside gracefully for the family's sake. The words hit like ice water. I'd heard versions of that phrase my whole life. For the family's sake. It was the Dunn equivalent of be quiet. I took a slow breath, trying to stop my hands from shaking. Then I looked her in the eye and said, You've mistaken my silence for obedience. Her jaw tightened. Shelby, don't turn this into something ugly. We're protecting you. From what? I asked. Ownership? Accountability? The truth. From yourself, she said. You never know when to stop pushing. I stood. My chair scraped softly against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the parlor, clean and final. I left the folder where it was, open, with the pen stabbed through the top corner of the page like a small dagger. As I walked out, I heard her say behind me, You're making a mistake, Shelby. Maybe I was, but at least it would be mine. When I got home, I couldn't stop replaying the moment, the pen glinting against the paper, my mother's calm voice, the silent assumption that I would fold. Again, the rain had stopped, but thunder rolled somewhere distant, as if the sky was warning me what was coming next. I poured myself a drink and sat on the couch. My phone buzzed. Another email. Subject, final copy, waiver of claim, signed. The document opened without hesitation. I stared at the bottom of the page. My name was there, perfect cursive, digital, and neat, signed and time-stamped. I hadn't touched a pen. For a long moment, I just sat there, the sound of the refrigerator humming behind me, the glass sweating in my hand. Someone had logged my signature electronically, someone who knew my password, or someone who thought they'd get away with pretending to be me. So that's the game, I whispered. I closed my laptop slowly, my reflection faint in the screen. Eyes hollow but awake, I felt the familiar surge of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years, Control. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to confront them tonight. That would be giving them the scene they wanted, the proof that I was unbalanced, emotional, easy to dismiss. Instead, I reached for the old hard drive I'd kept in a drawer for years. The one with my archive cases, my client files, and most importantly, my templates for legal retractions and fraud claims. It still had everything. As the drive whirred to life, I felt something click into place inside me. Not rage, not revenge, but purpose. Looking back now, that was the night the line between daughter and defendant disappeared. By the time I walked into the auditorium, my face knew how to perform without me. The corners of my lips lifted automatically, the way they had since I was 12, polite, pretty, slightly forgettable. That's what they wanted. A bride who could be dressed, placed, and muted. The lights were dimmed except for the large projection screen that glowed like a full moon at the center of the room. The chairs were arranged neatly in rows, each marked with a monogrammed card. A tech assistant waved when he saw me, just running the slideshow for the tribute segment. He said, "We'll loop through to double-check timing." I nodded, taking a seat in the back row. The first slide clicked on. Astrius, as a toddler, holding a gold trophy almost as big as his torso. Another click, Vera and Tiberius in front of a courthouse, shaking hands with someone I vaguely remembered from local politics. Then came Christmas photos, graduation snapshots, real estate gala moments. I waited. The music swelled softly in the background. More family milestones, vacations to Aspen, ribbon cuttings for Dunn Group properties, barbecues with smiling guests I didn't recognize. And then there was a picture of me. At least, it should have been. Instead, it was a cropped shot of Vera holding a newborn. You could just barely see the curve of my infant leg, as if even then I was an afterthought. I didn't say anything. I didn't breathe. Click. Astrius in high school. Prom king. Click. My law school class photo, blurry, zoomed from too far back. I sat in the middle row, my face half covered by someone's shoulder. I wasn't just edited out. I was made background. Looking back now, I know that was when something inside me stopped asking to be seen. The next transition happened quickly. A flicker of static, then a file name, bold white text against black. Asset _ tx _ Shelby removal _ v2.pdf. Hovered on the screen for just a second. Long enough. The file snapped away just as the tech assistant scrambled at his laptop. "Sorry, wrong folder," he muttered. That wasn't supposed to be in the queue. But I'd seen it. The name of the file was unmistakable. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't even professional. It was surgical, like a planned procedure with my name as the incision. My hand stayed still in my lap. My spine didn't move, but my breath came slower now, sharper, like it knew something my mouth wasn't ready to say. I stood, quietly, walked past the assistant without looking at him, stepped into the hallway, and didn't stop until I reached the back exit. No one followed me. Outside, the sun glared against the concrete. It felt wrong, too bright for what I had just seen. The weight of it pressed down on my shoulders, and still I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, because it wasn't new. The file name haunted me the whole drive home. Shelby removal. As if I were a virus, something to be deleted for smoother operation. I opened my laptop the moment I got inside, searched the Dunn Group shared drive with the limited access I still had, buried under layers of PR decks and financial reports. I found it. The file had a timestamp 3 weeks ago, and it bore my signature. Electronic, flawless, forged. The deed it referenced transferred a small property once tied to my name, a beach rental I inherited from my grandmother, into a holding company managed by Astrius. I stared at the screen until the text began to blur, not from tears, from calculation. They didn't just want to cut me out. They wanted to build an entire legacy on the ashes of my erasure. I didn't delete the file. I didn't forward it. I downloaded 3 copies, one encrypted, one offline, one labeled "If I Vanish." Then I created a new folder on my desktop and named it Exit Route. I started installing encrypted tracking on every Dunn Group email address tied to my name. It wasn't illegal, not yet. I wasn't stealing anything. I was documenting, preparing. My fingers didn't shake this time. That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence was too honest, too loud. I poured a glass of water and sat on the floor, my back against the wall, the screen of my laptop casting faint light across the ceiling. The message came in around 2:17 a.m. Blocked number, no name, just one sentence. Wrong folder. That wasn't meant for slideshow cue. No apology, no denial, just a mistake acknowledged like a grocery item is rung at checkout. I typed back, keep sending mistakes like that. I'm starting to remember who I am. I didn't hit send for a full minute. Then I did. And after that, I didn't feel tired anymore. Morning came soft and gray, the kind of light that erases sharp edges. I sat at my vanity brushing my hair, watching the reflection move in fragments. Hand, wrist, eyes. Then something caught the corner of my gaze. A small, steady blink. Red. Too deliberate to be a reflection. I leaned closer, heart thudding, the air thick with perfume and unease. The light pulsed again from the edge of the wall sconce beside the mirror. A single red dot, the size of a freckle. Before I could reach for it, Soren appeared in the doorway. He'd come early that morning to drive me to the rehearsal. He followed my eyes to the sconce. "That's not for lighting," he said, voice flat, calm in the way danger makes some men calm. I moved my hand toward the wall, fingers trembling slightly. The glass cover came off too easily, revealing a tiny pinhole, lens wired to a small black box. A wireless camera. Soren took it down gently, like handling something poisonous. "It's transmitting," he said. "The signal's active." "To where?" I asked, though I already knew. He didn't answer, just turned the device in his hand, reading the serial number. "It's routed through your parents' security grid. Whoever installed it had full access." I felt the kind of silence that doesn't come from lack of words. It's the heavy kind, the kind that carries recognition. They weren't watching for my safety. They were watching for my rebellion. Soren reached for my shoulder, steady but soft. "You don't have to stay here tonight," he said. "I do," I whispered. "Not because I want to, because they expect me to leave." We took the camera apart together, piece by piece. I didn't shake. I'd already reached the part of anger where calm lives. That night, Soren called me from his car. "You need to hear this," he said. He'd accessed the household server using a temporary override, something he claimed was routine. But nothing about the sound that filled my speaker was routine. Tiberius's voice, firm, unhurried. We need her out of the paper trail. Once the wedding's signed, the assets are consolidated. After that, she's just noise. Then Astrius, laughing lightly. She's always been noise, Dad. This just makes it official. And my mother, Vera, her tone steady, resigned. She won't fight. She never does. I pressed the phone against my ear, but my pulse drowned out their words halfway through. When the recording ended, I said nothing. Soren waited. Shelby, I'm here, I said quietly, just making sure I heard everything right. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I let the silence confirm what I already knew. Looking back, that was the moment my heart stopped being theirs. I remembered a winter years ago, my cousin Leora crying in the old cabin at Lake Hartwell, telling me her mother's house had been sold without her consent. It was in the will, she said through tears. They told me it's what Aunt Vera wanted. And I'd said, trying to comfort her, maybe it's just paperwork. I was wrong. It was never paperwork. It was power. The rehearsal, the next day, blurred around me. Voices, footsteps, the sound of chairs scraping the floor. My dress brushed the aisle runner, and my smile did its duty. In the middle of it, I stepped away to the restroom just to breathe. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed softly. I leaned against the counter, counting each breath. The mirror above the sink stared back, unblinking. Shelby, a voice said from behind. It was Leora, younger, gentler, always the quiet one at family gatherings. Her eyes darted toward the door before she whispered, They did it to my mom, too. What? The same transfer documents. Same lawyer. I found proof last year. I wanted to tell you, but I was scared. My stomach tightened. But you're not scared now? Leora straightened her shoulders. You finally looked like someone worth following. The words hit me harder than any insult I'd ever received. Worth following. I smiled then, small, tired, but real. Then let's start walking. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there, two women bound by silence that was finally breaking. Later that evening, I texted Soren from the car. We're not walking into a wedding. We're walking into a trap we designed. His reply came within seconds. Good. Then let's set the date. The air outside was cool, still carrying the scent of rain from the night before. I rolled down the window and let the wind touch my face. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, gently, in the quiet between breaths. I didn't know what was waiting for me next, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to see it. The quiet resolve from the car ride lingered as I stepped into the venue the next morning. Everything around me shimmered with pretense. Marble floors too polished, florals too fragrant, people too polite. The final walkthrough was supposed to be ceremonial, predictable. I had other plans. Waitstaff moved through the hall with quiet precision. Silver trays carried champagne flutes balanced like glass soldiers. One server paused beside me. Young, unbothered, unreadable. He tilted the tray slightly, exposing a folded ivory napkin. I picked it up. Beneath it, a slim USB drive. He didn't speak. He just nodded and kept walking. I slipped the drive into my clutch and smiled. For real this time. That's when the trembling stopped. Back home, I plugged the USB into my laptop. The screen flickered once, then opened a single file. Done holdings _internal_ shall be asset to vest _final .pdf. I read each line slowly, deliberately. The document detailed a property transfer, my name removed from a beach house title, rerouted through a shell entity, and reassigned to Astrius. It had been signed, dated, sealed. I hadn't even known it was being debated. I didn't cry. I printed 3 copies instead, labeled them by hand. Guest folder, seat A4. B6. Ashan. Soren texted, venue Wi-Fi still open? I responded, yes. His reply was immediate. I've back-channeled the slideshow files. Want me to plant it? Not yet, I typed. Let them walk into it, thinking they're still in control. Seconds later, he sent me a file attachment, floor plan _camera angles _surveillance _OK .pdf. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the copy of my signature printed on legal letterhead. A call came in. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice, low and clipped. You're going to be detained if you show up in a white dress. Think that through. Then click. No threats. Just facts. Delivered like a weather update. I didn't flinch. I stood up slowly, walked to the living room, and picked up my phone. Texted one word to Soren. Amber. The line had officially been crossed. The rest of the evening unraveled in silence. I didn't feel rage, not even fear. What I felt was colder than that. It was the stillness of someone who had already made her peace with the fallout. I remembered being 14. It was my birthday. Astrius had accidentally knocked the cake off the deck during the party. She's overdramatic, he told everyone, smirking. It was just a cake. They made me apologize, said I was ruining the moment, that I should have been grateful we even celebrated. It was always like that. Not anymore. I folded the extra copies of the property transfer file and placed them into envelopes. The names were already written in ink, people who'd sat silently at dinners, who'd toasted Astrius with forced smiles, who'd watched me disappear 1 inch at a time. This time, I'd make sure they saw me whole. Later, in the car with Soren, we sat parked outside a diner we weren't planning to eat at. He opened the glove box and pulled out a single black earpiece. He held it out to me. I took it. Tomorrow, I said, voice steady, we give them their stage. He nodded once. Then we take it away. I placed the earpiece gently into my left ear, just as the organ began to play. Each note rolled down the nave like waves washing over stone. They were expecting grace, reverence, and for the first time, I planned to give them exactly what they expected, until I didn't. The bride's anteroom was chilled from the air conditioning, and the nerves I wouldn't name out loud. My dress, white, classic, perfectly tailored, hugged my frame without apology. I stared at myself in the full-length mirror, watching the reflection blink back without a flicker of doubt. But I wasn't admiring the dress. Tucked between the stems of my bouquet was a small black button, a transmitter, a trigger. Mic check, I whispered. Soren's voice answered in my ear, clear and certain. Clear. All teams in place. I nodded, just once, to no one in the room. The doors opened. The crowd rose. My steps were measured, steady, softer than I expected across the stone floor. Leora sat in the front row, chin lifted, lips drawn in a careful line. Our eyes didn't meet. but her stillness was enough. Soren stood at the altar, his expression unreadable, not cold, not warm, just present. A sentinel. The officiant began with the usual pleasantries, but I barely heard them. I scanned the crowd slowly. Most were Dunn affiliates, political allies, family friends, people who owed my parents favors or feared their memory. I watched their shoulders relax. They thought they'd won. I let them breathe. Then the voice rang out. Arrest the bride. Gasps cut through the sanctuary like cracked glass. For men rose from various pews, plainclothes, deliberate, flashing badges that caught the light. They moved with the false urgency of theater, eyes narrowed, hands near their hips. I didn't flinch. Soren's voice broke into my ear again, low and surgical. Target confirmed. Move in. The plainclothes men froze mid-aisle. Then, in perfect synchrony, they turned not toward me, but toward Astrius. Gasps turned to murmurs. The mood cracked open. A large projection screen began to descend behind the altar, silent and slow like a curtain before the real show. Every head turned toward it. The officiant stepped back instinctively. On screen, a folder opened. The title, Done Evidence, ORIG plus AUTH timestamped. First, an audio clip. Astrius's voice, unmistakable, smug. Push it through. Once she signs the wedding license, it's locked. She doesn't even need to know. Tiberius followed, colder. Get her out of the paperwork. That's all that matters. Image, not inclusion. Then Vera, quiet, almost tired. She won't fight. She never does. Each word hit like a stone across a pond, rippling through pews lined with guests who'd been told I was unstable, over-emotional, difficult. Next, a flurry of documents appeared on screen. Signatures, emails, time logs, legal files that outlined the asset transfers from my name to shell companies connected to Astrius. Each slide timestamped, notarized, indisputable. Then came the final blow. Footage from the hidden camera found in my room. Silence stretched long and tight. The air turned thick, no longer holy. I didn't move. I didn't lower my eyes. My bouquet now hung loosely at my side, no longer a prop, but a statement. Astrius stood, voice rising in pitch. This is a setup. You're all watching, Soren stepped forward, flanked by the same agents. His tone stayed calm. Mr. Astrius Dunn, you are under arrest for document fraud, coercion, and unlawful surveillance. Astrius lunged. One agent stepped between us, pinning his arms behind his back. The room erupted, not with chaos, but whispers sharp enough to draw blood. I turned back toward the guests, lifting the bouquet again. Let the ceremony continue. The reception began in whispers. No one toasted. No one laughed. The clinking of silverware against china sounded like rainfall on metal, steady, uncomfortable, impossible to ignore. I sat at the head table, still in the same dress that now felt more like evidence than attire. Around me, guests shifted in their seats, pretending to eat. Soren sat beside me, silent, steady. His hand brushed mine, once beneath the table. No reassurance, just a reminder that I was still here. Before me sat a plain brown envelope marked in black ink, "Before you toast." It was time. I stood, the soft jazz halting mid-note as the band looked up. "Excuse me," I said, voice low but firm. "Before anyone raises a glass tonight, There's one more truth to share. This one's mine. Every head turned. Even the clinking stopped. I reached into the envelope and pulled out a single page, a printed transcript, and a small digital recorder. This recording is 6 years old. I said, it's from a meeting between myself and my father. At the time, I believed I was protecting our family. In truth, I was helping bury a crime. The room didn't move. I pressed play. Tiberius's voice filled the hall. Calm, measured, the way he always sounded when he was covering something. The funds were misallocated, not stolen. You'll file the paperwork tonight. You'll say it was a clerical mistake. That's what good daughters do. Then my younger voice, shaking slightly. It's illegal. It's family, he had said. You'll thank me one day. The recording ended. The sound of breathing filled the silence that followed. I kept it buried. I said, steady now. I thought silence protected what was left of our name. But it only buried me. My mother, Vera, gripped the edge of her chair as if it could save her. Her pearls trembled against her throat. Tiberius stared at the table, expression carved in stone. Neither spoke. This wedding was never about celebration. I continued. It was about correction. I am not your eraser anymore. Someone near the back gasped softly. I kept my eyes forward. For years, I thought dignity meant quiet endurance. Now I knew it meant telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. Soren's hand found mine again under the table. He didn't squeeze. He didn't whisper comfort. He just said quietly, you didn't need to prove anything. You were always the truth. I sat down, letting the words land where they would. The hall, once filled with ambition and false warmth, went still. Even the air seemed to bow its head. After a moment, I opened my clutch and pulled out a folded page, aged, creased, but intact. The original property deed my mother had tried to erase. I stood again and walked toward Leora, who sat near the center table, eyes wide. Your mother deserved it, I said softly, handing it to her. Now you can. Her hands shook as she took it. Tears welled, but she didn't look away. For a long heartbeat, no one spoke. Then from the far left table, a single pair of hands began to clap. The sound echoed sharp, defiant. Another joined in. Then another. Not approval, recognition. The sound of people realizing the weight of silence lifted. But I didn't smile. I didn't stand to acknowledge it. I leaned toward Soren and whispered, tomorrow we vanish. Let them rebuild without us. He nodded once, the faintest hint of relief in his eyes. As the band hesitated before restarting, I looked around the room. The faces of my family, pale, hollow, stripped of power, blurred into the candle's flicker. For the first time in my life, I didn't see them as untouchable. I saw them as what they'd always been, fragile people terrified of truth. And I was finally free of their fear. Morning crept in quietly. Pale light threaded through the gauze curtains, painting the hardwood floor in stripes of gold and blue. I sat by the fireplace in the cabin, wrapped in a wool blanket, the weight of it softer than it had any right to be. The coffee in my hand had gone lukewarm, but I hadn't moved to reheat it. Across from me, the fire-safe box sat open. Inside, documents that had ruled my life for too long, court petitions, evidence copies, wedding contracts now void, surveillance reports with my name on every header, a paper trail of my own disappearance. I reached inside slowly, Not with fear, with release. Each page fed to the fire was a small ceremony. No speeches, no rage, only the soft hiss of ink and legal weight curling into smoke. The flame didn't roar. It flickered, gentle, unhurried. I whispered to no one, no more proving, no more preserving. The wedding had ended with applause, but this was the real ending, and it didn't need an audience. On the small oak table beside me sat a letter I hadn't opened. My father's handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, slanted, always a little too formal. The envelope was thick, the seal unbroken. I picked it up, turned it in my hand once. Then I slid it straight into the fire. It caught instantly, curling at the corners like it had been waiting for this. He already said enough with silence. I murmured. The wood popped in response, like agreement. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, but because grief wasn't what I carried anymore. It was weightless now. The phone buzzed once from the kitchen counter. A message left behind. Leora's voice came through in the stillness. The committee froze his accounts this morning. They're auditing every city contract tied to him. I thought you'd want to know. A pause. Also, my mom cried. The good kind. She said thank you. I listened. Then I deleted the message. Not because I didn't care, but because I no longer needed to hold on to proof that the right things had finally begun to happen. Outside, birdsong crept into the room. Soft. Alive. I turned back to the fire. Soren came in quietly, the cabin door clicking shut behind him. He didn't ask how I slept. He didn't ask what I'd burned. He just sat down beside me and placed a single brass key in my palm. A new mailbox, he said. In your name. Unlinked. Clean. I ran my thumb over the engraving. Smooth. Blank. No legacy, he said. Eyes on the fire. Just future. I smiled, small, but it was real. It belonged to no one else. I leaned into his shoulder, letting the quiet hold us both. For the first time in years, I felt the space around me without the noise of expectation. No cameras, no signatures, no versions of me rewritten to suit someone else's myth. Just breath, just mourning, just enough. Looking back now, I can say this with certainty. They tried to erase me, but all they did was make me see myself clearly. I didn't need revenge. I needed space. And peace feels louder than applause. We stood together then, walking toward the porch. The fire behind us crackled one final time before settling into ash. I watched as the last pages turned to ember, their weight finally lifted. We stepped outside. The wind rose gently, lifting bits of gray into the sunlight. They scattered upward, slow and wild. Behind us, the fire fading. Ahead, a dirt road. Quiet, open. Some stories don't end with applause. They end in quiet, in the sound of your own breath, finally unburdened. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who called it love while rewriting your name out of the story, you're not alone. Have you ever had to choose peace over belonging? If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more. We're just getting started.